I want you to understand their real names. Because when we honor our ancestors, we say there's 4 ways we honor them. The first way is to speak their name, the way they spoke it. The second is to honor their great works and to continue it and keep it in your mind. Thirdly is the honor, and the third one is to continue their great works. So that's what Taaqiy is doing here. We're continuing the great works. And the fourth one is to leave images, edifice, pictures, carvings of them so that we'll know what our ancestors look like.
Sweet.
Because you can see what they do in the movies. They make all these African ancestors Europeans.
Right.
Okay, every chance they get. I mean, I don't even think Europeans believe it. Okay, but that's the image they give you. Okay?
Right.
So keep it in your mind so that your children will know what your ancestors look
That's
like.
right.
Look, this is called the Kapresh crown, or the blue crown, or the war crown. Most of the time, you see the little curls? That represents nappy hair. The word hair in Medinet is nappy. So when somebody said you had nappy hair, that was the Medinet word for hair. But that was called the war crown. It was imitating a hairstyle of the warriors, the Kushite warriors, who helped kick the Hyksos out. And so they were commemorating them. And so every time the king was talking about war or battle or strategic, they would put this crown on, commemorating the brothers from the south. So you won't see this before the 3rd Golden Age. This came in after the 7th to 18th dynasty. So the 18th dynasty on. So if you see something before that, you know it wasn't the old period. It had to be the new period. So the room we just left, Akhenaten, this is his parents. This is Jhutyms and Queen T.
Whose son?
This is Akhenaten's parents. And so like I said, she was one of the most powerful women in Kemet. She ruled under 3 or 4 kings. And you can see the royal cobra and the headdress, vulture, and the cobra up in the Kemet. So in order to have a statue this big, you can see how they venerated her.
Yeah.
See, they used to be able to do this. They didn't know we could read it. Now we can read the Medinet, so we don't have to take Egyptology. We can read the stuff ourselves. Now, one is supposed to be a baboon. Only one is supposed to be a human. Okay, one is a falcon, a human, a baboon, and they represent the various organs in the body, like the large intestines, small intestines. Now, somebody asked, well, why did they sahu the intestines? You're not going to read this. When you go through the judgment scene, they ask you questions. Have you stolen? You go, no, I have not. Have you killed anybody? No, I have not. Have you committed adultery? No, I have not. And Jhuty writes everything down. So you get past Jhuty, right? So Haru now brings you to his father, who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. So now, Asar examines your organs. The Mesurajar is inside the there. So if your liver is all shriveled up, you've been lying. I'm a vegetarian, and I don't smoke, and your lungs is all black. So Asar, your organs don't lie. Okay? So that's why they paid strict attention of carrying and taking those organs out, cleaning them, wrapping them up, and then preparing them for Asar. So it was symbolic, but you understand the concept. The concept was that you're supposed to be pure in heart, in body, and in mind. So that was to make sure you were pure in body. Jhuty checked your mind. And then Asar, again, is going to check your soul. gemstones and crystals. They took my crystals outside. Okay, but I got some. I can't show. All right, you saw turquoise. Turquoise is the most used stone by indigenous people all around the planet. Okay, so the ancient kings, it's communication and it puts you in touch with your ancestors. You saw lapis lazuli, the dark blue stone. That's called the wisdom stone that operates on your pioneer's land. That color is called royal blue. So all around the world, people call that color royal blue, not knowing that it comes from here, the kings of ancient Kemet wore it. And so that's why it's royal blue. You saw carnelian, I show my ring. You saw carnelian.
Just give me an announcement. Tell them.
Right. Guys, we will have free time now at the bus. We will meet before you go, I need you to give me the headset.
And they made these little guys called Shawakas, and they would go in the tomb, and they were supposed to be workers in the afterlife. So you no longer had the, and then Europeans imitated that. The Vikings, when the king died, his wife had to die with him and all the servants. So everybody's trying to imitate what we were doing, but we stopped doing it. Right. Okay, because we realized it was a waste of life. So you see these little, now these were done, you can tell these are real royal because they look like the image of the actual king. Right. But you're going to see inside of here some generic ones. So if your money wasn't long, for a bushel of bananas, you can get 50 shawakas. Okay. There's like 38, 40 graves. All his help went with him. That was ritual killings. Yeah. So they realized that that was a waste of human, life. Yeah. So instead of killing somebody now with the king, they created these little guys. They're called shawakas. They're spirit workers in the afterlife. So instead of killing you and having you work in the afterlife, they made a statue and
representing that
represent
their assignment.
This is all symbolic.
So that's stone.
That's waiting for you.
So that's stone painted.
He wants to go inside the treasure.
Oh, okay.
So afro wigs, locks, braids. So these were real wigs found inside of tombs that you could see that they would actually be wearing. So you can see, remember the word nappy. Nappy is the word for hair. I remember my mother used to say, comb that nappy hair. So braids, and see, they try to tell you that you only had European rulers all of this time. If you look at every king's hair, no king got straight hair. They knew how to make straight hair. When they did the Greeks, they put straight hair. And white women, you see straight hair. The sisters no sister in Kemet had hair like that. They would always show braids or locks. And cornrows is a definite giveaway. Okay. So even in Mexico, the Hor-em-akhets, cornrows in the back. Nubian cut.
There are no difference between.
So the wigs would imitate real hairstyles.
Right.
It wasn't like just some Hollywood. There wasn't no Hollywood, okay? There's some real hairstyles. So people actually wore the hair like this. You'll see in Sudan today, you'll even see the afros. And some of the early kings had afros, wore afros. You'll see some of the kings in the third golden age with locks, big jumbo Rastafarian locks. And I don't know how to explain that away. way the Western world has it is that ancient Khans learned from ancient Kemet. But you see the white crown, you see all the Quranic, all their materials are being used in ancient Khans first. The idea that Haru represents the great king. But I want to point this out. On the Sarek, you see this. Now, Egyptologists will try to tell you that Imhotep is the first person to do this. But you just show up on the Sarek 500 years, maybe 800 or 1,000 years before Imhotep came into existence. Imhotep belonged to a group called Hor-em-akhet. That is a segment of the Magi. So he was a Magi priest. And Djoser was also a Magi priest who became the king of ancient Kemet. So I'm just trying to show you this lineage goes to the interior of Africa. It's just that Kemet was the best preserver of it. So this knowledge that took place inside of Africa was brought down the Nile, not up, down the Nile, and Kemet preserved it. So now, but they say Imhotep was the father of this. No, he is just one of the first recorded multi-level geniuses. So we got to watch our terminology. We don't want to do what the Westerners do. Somebody's the father of this, the father of that, you know. No, he's one of the first recorded multi-level geniuses that introduced this to Djoser. And Djoser's other name is Hor-em-akhet. I want you to understand their real names. Because when we honor our ancestors, we say there's 4 ways we honor them. The first way is to speak their name the way they spoke it. The second is to honor their great works and to continue it and keep it in your mind. Thirdly is the honor, and the third one is to continue their great works. So that's what we're doing here. We're continuing the great works. And the fourth one is to leave images, edifice, pictures, carvings of them so that we'll know what our ancestors looked like.
Sweet.
Because you can see what they do in the movies. They make all these African ancestors Europeans.
Right.
Okay, every chance they get. I mean, I don't even think Europeans believe it. Okay, but that's the image they give you. Okay?
Right.
So keep it in your mind so that your children will know what your ancestors look
That's
like.
right.
What we're going to do now is we're going to separate the two.
So this is this was on.
Is this a temple? This a temple?
Habibi!
This was the entrance temple to the step pyramids.
Habibi!
Habibi.
Habibi! Habibi! Please come here. Thank you. So we do a space for the rest. All right.
People in the back, come forward.
People at the back, come forward. Good student. You are not included. You are not included. Here, stay aside. We're blocking the entrance, by the way. We're blocking the entrance. Wait a minute. But anyway, we won't take about the group. Okay. We are blocking. Come, please, come, because we won't take long because we are blocking the entrance. So this is, as I mentioned before, guys, that this is the complex of King Djoser. I told you that the walls were 10 meters high. To go inside the complex, you just go between those beautiful pillars. The pillars are located in both sides. If you look to the pillars, it used to be 10 meters high, exactly high as the ceiling, as high as the ceiling is located right now. We just did the ceiling to show you the original heights, how far the pillars were up to. If you look to the bottom of the pillars, you can see that down it's wide. Then it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Thinner and thinner and thinner. So actually when they did it, they were afraid that the pillars would not be able to carry the ceiling. So what they did, this was their first try to do a building with the major stones, with the stones as you see. So mistakes are allowed. So to avoid the mistake, that what they did, that they attached the pillar with a wall, all the way to the back wall, to do like an extra support, so it could carry the weight of the pillars could carry the ceiling, as you can see in there. Between those pillars, they put the statue of the king in there, in here, at the sides. So when you are entering the complex, this complex, by the way, is made by Imhotep, his minister, his talented minister, the one that he's been worshipped later on and considered as a god of medicine as well as god of engineering, in a later period. So, as I told you, that's the complex which is leading to a court that they used to celebrate one of their famous festival in there at that court, a holy festival, and when we go there, we can talk about. Let's go in there.
Can I just say something? If you all look at this, this is imitating real nature. So I want you to understand everything the ancient Kemet did. They was trying to imitate something that happened naturally in nature. These would have been bamboo shoots or small trees tied to papyrus, tied together. Okay, so they were imitating what they saw really in nature. They just did it in stone.
Come on through. No, no back.
Leave, my friend, okay? Later. Alligator
Oh, sweet, man.
Want to start $1,000?
Hey, that's a good one. Not right now. Not right now. Ali, I know.
That's an Arabic word for bench. This is correct. This is true.
They didn't know nothing about a mastaba, so it's a per-ankh-dejed. That means a living house for eternity. That's different from a bench. Mastaba, so I just want y'all to just keep that in the back of your head, okay? This is a house of eternity. And they just build them on top of each other. Okay. All right, so I just want to make that correction.
That's correct. But that's the way it's been written.
Egyptologists.
That's the way it's been written, and that's the way it's been presented. That's the way it's presented, and I believe that he's totally right, because this is the house of eternity. Right. This is what it's been made. This is what it's been made for.
If you look in your book, if you Google concrete, it's going to try to tell you that the Romans created concrete. And wrong. Concrete was being used when they built this in the first golden age. When you go down into Djoser's tomb, you can see where there was a wooden column and the concrete is poured all around it, encasing it in, to prove that concrete was laid with the ancient Kemet created concrete more than 4,000, 5,000 BCE. So I'm just trying to give you that in your head.
This open code been made to celebrate, to imitate very famous celebrations that it used to be. We will go from here. We will go from here to go inside the tomb of King Onas. Sorry, the pyramid of King Onas. In there, where we will be able to see the text, the pyramid's text, and then after that we will continue. As I promised you, I will take you to the most beautiful tomb in my personal opinion, which is located here in Saqqara. Later, after the pyramid. Make a circle around us.
This is a very important pyramid
Come around.
that most people don't get a chance to
I
see.
love this stone of this.
This is Unas.
Yes.
Unas is the last king of the 5th dynasty. This is where they have the pyramid text. So the pyramid text is between Unas and Teti. And then there's another king in between. So 4 kings house the pyramid text, which we call the Mirkut Sabiat. The Mirkut Sabiat. And so this is some of the oldest spiritual religious writings in the world that's recorded. And you'll see it on the walls here. It's on the walls, on the ceiling, everywhere inside. So this was a pyramid. It's collapsed now, but this was a pyramid done during the 5th dynasty. And then Teti, is over on the other side, is the 6th dynasty. So, and I say so-called because there weren't no dynasties like that. This is still the first pyramid. So this is after the great pyramids of Unas and all the way they built this. But remember,
We will close. Let's go.
this is the pyramid text. So take some pictures because we don't get in here often.
This is, I've been, I get Felicia up in here about 50 times.
There is no
This will be my first time
explanation.
in
There is no explanations inside.
So,
So please go to the pictures. And come back.
Okay, this was made for me.
Sisters wrote it all down for us. All this for us to see. These cats don't even know how to read this. Oh, wow. Let's just see what the hell is left. Wow. This is amazing. Writing on the wall.
yeah, you gotta turn the lights off, then shine on one side of the wall. Some buck behind you. Coming through, brother.
You ain't gonna do it? where they're coming from. Coming down the steps right there. They're going back up, huh? Oh no, they up or something.
Oh, y'all leaving?
Y'all have to hear my lecture later.
All right, what's in here? Oh, wow.
That's beautiful.
What's up there? Yeah. We are in the pyramid and this. And this is the electrical world. Just had to get it. I'm on my way down. We're inside. About 100-foot climb down there. And then we came back up these stairs. That train. Now I'm going back in. All right. Yes, sir. You don't want to be on camera.
No photo inside here, please. No photo.
All right, all good. All good. I'm just trying to get the entrance.
What's up? What's up?
everybody built a section. Technically, this is 1.5 miles long and 1 mile wide. It's the largest temple in the world. Okay, so you're getting ready to really get a treat. You're either going to see some 25th dynasty, Tahaka and all of them. You're going to see some of their stuff. So remember, each king added on to this. You're going to see the sacred pool. It used to be attached to the Nile. Yeah, it used to be attached. The largest Tekken that still exists is here. And it's done by a woman, Hatshepsut Amun. Her Tekken is here. Okay? It's still standing. It's still standing. You're going to see Amun, like I say, all of the kings contribute to this particular. This was like, the real name is Iput Isut, the most holy of holy temples. So I want y'all to know the real stuff. Luxor is, I don't even know what language that is. Is that Greek or? Arabic. Okay, all right. So, Mentu Imhotep wouldn't know what Luxor was. Okay, all right. So this is Waset. And what the scepter was means dominion and power. So it's the city of dominion and power. And you have Iput Iset and Iput Isut. That's what we're going to next. So I want y'all to understand these words because these words have power. People don't want you to empower yourself. So these words have power. So again, as you go through, you can see unfinished. The reason how we know how certain things was done is because some things are unfinished. So you can see the steps of building. The hypostyle hall where they have these columns. I want you to, when you're standing with those columns and you're looking, a basketball team from the NBA, if they put their arms around it, it would take, that's how it would take them to get around it. But what I want you to think of, I drew a picture once when I was in college, and it shows the hypostyle hall with the Kemet standing next to it. And the next picture was a Twa in the rainforest standing next to the giant trees. The ancient Kemet were imitating nature. So I know that's taken out of context. We just gonna say, ooh, ooh, ooh. And you're not gonna understand that we're imitating nature at every level. Those hypostyle hall, people from California here, the redwood trees and stuff like that. You're gonna see that. And the formula of pi, phi, the golden means is all being used in all construction here. So mathematically, the ancient Kemet put all of their science in the construction of their buildings. So when you see perfect statues, symmetrically perfect, they took all of their science and put it into their buildings, they put it into the carvings, they put it in there. And sometimes we miss that. We just be running around, ooh, 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 taking pictures, and you miss the science. The scientific formula of systematic thinking was created here. So I want you to just think these are your ancestors. And I want you to be thinking high consciousness. When you go through, hold your chest up high. High consciousness. You're not a tourist. You're visiting your ancestral shrines. That's right. Let's go. Yes, we can. Make it.
Yeah, of course, this is a commitment.
When they see God,
This is also, I want you to remember that everything we see, we will pass through our way out. So you will have to time and you will be able to see that you will see our way out. All over the most energetic part, all over the temple itself, which is the Holy of the Holies, which is always they keep the statue of the god in there. So they do it all the way from inside to outside. So usually the most old part of the temple is the sanctuary inside there, while the most fresh part of the temple the pylon that you see in front. And as an example, you know who did that pylon? Nefertari, the last king at the pharaonic period, 30 dynasty. He did this big pylon, which considered the biggest pylon all over Egypt. So Nefertari did the pylon, but it's not completed. As you see, you can still see the sand ram, the remains of the sand rams there by the wall itself. We left it as it is to show you how it used to be made. If you look to the right hand side, you can see a beautiful shrine made and dedicated to Amun, Mut and Khonsu, there to the right hand side. And that was built by the father of Ramesses II. If you look at the middle, you can see 10 pillars. 9 are broken while one is complete. The complete one, that's considered the highest pillar, the second highest pillar in Egypt after the one in Alexandria. And if you look to the crown of the pillar, you can see that it's the shape of papyrus flower and lotus flower, as you see in there. 10 pillars made by Taharqa, the Nubian king, 25 dynasty city. Two statues representing Ramesses II there in front of the second pylon. If you look to the right hand side, you can see a temple belongs or dedicated to Ramesses III. The temple, the body of the temple located outside of the court of the open court of Karnak, but Ramesses III became with the access inside the open court of Karnak temple just to put his mark, to have his feet inside the temple, to be memorable as you can see there. So what I want to tell you guys, Habibi, that we're still at the open court. As he mentioned, what do we see? We see Taharqa, we see Seti, we see Nefertari, we see Taharqa, we see Seti, we see Ramesses III, as well as we see Ramesses II, and this is only at the open court of the Karnak temple. That part of the temple, that was the only part for the people that they were allowed to come in. No one were allowed to go any further inside. Only the priest of the temple, and as soon as the rank is getting higher, they are allowed to go further and further.
Let's talk about the initiation process that we spoke about the other day, about the Freemasonry, and where they got their secrets and their sciences from in terms of having the steps or stages. The ancient Kemet were the first people to lay that foundation. In this temple, you have embedded the codes, and as I think you were saying, the secrets of the universe. That's why it was also ever expanding, because they saw it as the universe is expanding, so does this temple expand. And this temple itself represents the evolution of creation, coming from the darkness into the light. So the darkness is where the divine dwells. Now that darkness comes light, as Genesis says. So that's where the Bible get that story from this temple. This temple and the pyramids, in a sense, is almost the same thing in that it mimics the story of creation. As we go through the temple, we're actually going back through time, going into the essence of creation. The same thing with the pyramids. As the pyramids rise from the mound or the primeval waters out of the darkness of noon, come forth, thus creation is being brought forth. It's the same thing in this temple here. And that's the same thing with all Kemetic temples, and that's the science of it, to understand that this is not just a temple, this is also what I like to call a three-dimensional glyph. And the question is, what are they communicating here in this temple? The temple itself is meta-nature. Not just the meta-nature on the wall, but the temple construction itself is speaking to you in that aspect.
Like, this is the legs here. We're going into the body, going towards the head. And when he talked about the Holy of Holies would be where your pineal gland is. So I'm just trying to give you a picture. If you see the human body, now each temple is a living entity. It's not just some place you go to worship. Church was home here. Your shrine, your church was home. You came here. This was a sacred university.
That's literally what it was, a university. And for commoners, people who weren't initiated, this is as far as Imagine was saying this is as far as you could go until you were initiated, then you can enter further into the temple. You got to the next stage, you go further and further. And that's the same thing as the degrees in Freemasonry, to tell you where they got that from. So there were some people that acknowledged that. So You know, so we can actually walk to the next phase or go to the next step,
Absolutely.
which is the hyper-style hall.
Follow, please.
Missing class.
Everything that you broke out of it, everything that you became, but it also represents the South. And I keep letting y'all know the South meant interior of Africa. Up South. Up South. No, that's not a bird, that's a bee.
Only because of his sin.
The high priest. And let me just say this.
And the king, it's only because of his power and authority.
But the king is also the high priest. So I want you to know that. The king is the high priest. He can't be in all the temples at one time. So he appoints the high priest to each temple. It's just like when the president of the United States gets inaugurated, he has to do his cabinet first. So the priests of each of these temples is like the Nasukritis cabinet. They have to represent him. And because every ceremony, he can't be in all of them, so the high priest. So only the king and the high priest can come in. But look at Hapi along the side too. So this is the Hapi tour. That's the nature of Hapi. So Hapi of the north and Hapi of the south. Amun, Kansu,
everything are repeated exactly the same order.
So
Yes.
Information because she was a woman. And they said, how dare you as a woman scholar in the academic arena without coming through the priesthood, through the step-by-step, come to tell us these things. And so that's why within the divine kingship system, the protocol is so important. Because if you start dealing with Orun Mila, who is over the Ifa system, but who's over Orun Mila, Olodumare, Orun Ileda. And so that would be your equivalent of Amun Ra. And so that Amun Ra, they said, take the holistic, take the whole form. And so that's why we have come here with our brother Taaqiy, that we will get an understanding of the totality. And once again at Karnak here, with the temple of Amun, that is at the highest level. So,
Amen. So we got the brother Asar Imhotep here, computer scientist and also a linguist. Can you add on to the binary act with the doctor? What's her name again? The doctor.
In other words, the topic was Kemet as the parent system
Like the binary
of
system.
other systems around the world.
like the Dogon, Ifa, Nak, Akan.
It's the duality of things that is very common across Africa. And like with the Ifa system, Ifa really comes from a word for birds. Like the early divination is called augury, or in academic terms it's called augury. But it's the flight of birds, or like the flight of arrows. So like, you know, you would kind of like in the sense of which Dogon do, where, you know, they ask certain questions and then they wait for the jackal to go over and then they interpret their marks. They interpret the flight patterns of birds. And that was the earliest form of what we call an Ifa. In ancient Egyptian, it's pronounced, it's written, transliteration. I use the German system. So B-J capital A, word for omens and things. You also see it's a variant of that word for birds.
Can you pronounce the word?
Some people say Bia, but you know, I'm a little bit more detailed, so it's more like bitter. Because the nasal lines are a long trail, but I'm not trying to I'm not trying to go there, but that's why I gave you the spelling. The B-I capital A if you're transliterating, or I use the German system,
That's the
so
word
the I is
ancient,
the
in ancient Kemet for divination.
Exactly. And then in the Bible it's called Oba. It's called Afa in Arabic. They do Ifa as well. And among the Dogon it's Bila. And it's probably the same things like in Bade and amongst people in the Congo and South Africa. It's old and it's widespread. And when we say E5, it's actually a shortened version. It's an L or R at the end. But Yoruba drops a lot of liquids that are cognitive with ancient Egyptian. But the dualities of life is kind of the cornerstone of African spiritual systems. And so even in modern quantum mechanics and things, like if they come up with a molecule, not necessarily a molecule, of like a proton or something to this nature, they automatically know now that there's going to be an opposite, you know, of it. But the African people already understood that, you know, if there's this, it can only be in reference, you know, their own form of relativity in essence. And so, you know, like when, what's the so-called God part?
Higgs boson.
The Higgs boson. You know, they once they find it, they know that there's an not necessarily anti, but there's an opposite to it. And so this fuels the study of the quantum mechanics. And this is what you find in, like I'm working on a book called Quantum Mechanics or Quantum Field Theory as African Heritage. And had not colonialism done its thing, you know, we would be like the, you know, the kind of the top scholars in that, because that was already built into the culture and the system. And so I try to use the spiritual traditions to get us into STEM and to understand the parallels. And like when you do the way that you count, that the way that you multiply and add in Medinet, that's the same binary system that you would use to, well, because computer systems is just electricity on and off. You know, it's just little gates, you know, that just opens on and off, and it's coded in a way. But it's that same type of thing that you find in Ethiopia. They count the same way. If you want to understand the counting system of ancient Egyptian, look at the Ethiopian system as well as the Ishangabone. The Ishangabone has a 2N system, which evolved into the system that you find in ancient Egypt as well. And so this is why it's important to not only study ancient Egypt, but to study it within its African context and to look for its brothers and sisters. Because it'll add flesh to, you know, what's missing in the academic, where they give you the kind of the bones and the structure, but you'll get, you know, the deeper insights of things, because we still practice these things. You know, it may not sound the same to you. So like if you know, talk about worshiping the God best. But if you go into Congo, it's Mbasi, or embody when you go to places like Kenya and things of that nature. Because the S palatalizes into R, so they say embody instead of Bas. You know.
We got a great boogie. We definitely give it up for Asar.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Love it. We got a I mean, listen.
Yeah, it's actually switched. This is the prototype shirt, so it's actually definitely that.
Temple's closing. All right, we got
This is what this is like Ramesses the third, fourth. It's like the same Ramesses. So they don't want to say the second name, so they'll just say Ramesses the fourth, Ramesses the third.
Right.
When nothing there says Ramesses.
Right. Nothing about it say Ramesses.
but it has something to do with the Nile and overflow.
All kingdom at the time of Khufu are greatest systems. I'd like you to look at the places flooded, as you can see from the underground water, one of the disadvantages of the high deck. But I want you to look where the staircase is, okay? To the left side of the lost stairs, you have a...
All right, here we go.
Heading down the Nile.
Another boat.
Resurrection actually took place. Because here's where you came to pay your respect. And here's where you came to learn about who this person was, their accomplishments, their deeds. Like over here on this side, you see the battles. People talk about the secrets, you see the forms of different aspects of martial arts prior to the Asiatics doing it. You see his accomplishments, his children. This is where it's like essentially his autobiography. But the reason for this is because once upon a time, these temples were essentially located next to the tombs. And as the tombs were constantly being robbed, they wanted to separate the spaces. The tombs in what they call today the Valley of the Kings were supposed to be hidden away. No one was supposed to know where they were. If you came here to give an offering to the king, or to the Seti, right? So here we have, again, this is also in a replica of what we saw at the Elephantine or the Karnak temple in terms of its design and its layout. But this is all for the aspect of the king Ramesses, who's known as Ramesses III.
I just wanted to point out, y'all see the horse and chariot. Yeah. You notice in the first and second golden age, you didn't see any horse or chariots. The Hyksos, the foreigners, came in and defeated Kemet with horses and chariots. And so the Kemet went and got the fastest horses that exist in Yemen, and then rebuilt the chariots more agile, stronger, and better, and defeated the enemy with his own weapons. And so here's Ramesses with the horse and chariot. They put the Seti bowmen, the archers, on there, and took it to them with their own instruments of war. So now you're going to see the horse and chariot as a Kemetic symbol of war and power.
No, the ancient Kemet was some of the most literate people, not the most literate people on earth. Yeah. Even more so even to today. They recorded everything. And some of the most prolific records come from this period, particularly of that of actually just right after this, when they begin to raid the royal tombs and destroy the mummies and steal the gold and so forth and so on. There was actually a sacred cast of mummies that was taken on other sahus that were taken and put into a secret location just to protect them. And the priest talked about it, but along with that, there was a court case that took place convicting people on trial that was a part of this grand conspiracy. And it's so important to understand just how they would just write all these records down and the reason why they had these mortuary temples here versus alongside their tombs. But what you have now, we talked about martial arts a second ago. When we finish talking here, you go on the other side, you can see from this period, but even 1,000 years before that,
that's what I'm
this tomb is from a place called Beni Hassan in Egypt. And you can see the Kemet practicing aspects of martial arts. Now, if Mfundishi's a grand master at martial arts, I'll let him take over from here.
Again, we're going back to the second golden age. These guys were followers under Mentu Hotep. And we see the written records of the Magi warriors and the Kemetic martial artists. And jiu-jitsu, karate, kung fu, all of that is coming from ancient Kemet. We already had sword fighting, stick fighting. And listen, it was ancient. This is 2000 BCE. And it was already more than 2,000 years old recorded. Now, I do want to say this. Almost every group of people on the planet has their own little way of combat. Okay, so I don't want to make it sound like, well, we were the first people, so that's why we created it first. But we're the first to record it as a science. So I want you to understand that. So, you know, when you're thinking, I know today when you think of martial arts, you start thinking Chinese.
Yep.
You know, and you stick in Japanese. Now, the Japanese, that's just 600 CE in the Common Era. That's not even, this is 2000 BCE. The Japanese 600 CE, Common Era. Shaolin Temple, 1000. You see? So we're going 2000 before anybody else organized it. And Quad is not kept, Quad is not kept, to bring people who brought it to China and Egypt are Africans. Damo is a 26th disciple of this. And he founds the Shaolin Temple. Okay, and when you go to China, on the walls, you're going to see black men teaching it. And if you ask the Chinese, how come y'all don't show this? They say, that's not our job. That's your job. Our job, we're promoting Chinese culture.
Right.
So when I tell you your culture is your medicine, you need your medicine teachers who understand your culture. They won't deny it, but they're not going to be pushing it.
That's
oh, yeah,
right.
black men taught
That's
us.
right.
No, they're not going to do
That's
that.
Right.
Yeah, this is in a place called Mahez, ancient name. Today it's called Beni Hassan.
Yeah. Chinese.
So Beni, I think I'm one of the only people that actually took expeditions there. I've taken 4 or 5 groups to Beni Hassan. Oh, in China. Oh, there's several Shaolin temples. Just look up the Shaolin temple in China. Old pictures, and you'll see them in my book, Spiritual Warriors Are Healers.
Yeah. Spiritual warrior.
Are healers.
And, you know,
All of this is listed on your site. You have a website.
Yeah, I have a website, mfundishijhutyms.net. My first 2 names, mfundishijhutyms.net. And there's a whole section.
You can find all your books.
Right, and this was called, instead of martial arts, I need y'all to understand the difference between martial arts and Mentu arts. Remember, Mentu is the nectar of war and combat. Martial was a Greek god that killed you, sodomized you, broke you down, and then taught you war. So you know, so when you're doing the martial arts, get ready to get sodomized. Get ready to get your whole character broken down like the military do. They break you down and they build you up in there. So we want to run to the martial arts instead of the Mentu combat system, Mentu system. So when I teach Kupagani and Gumi, that's the Mentu combat system, where we build character. Ma'at is the center. You're only at war to preserve Ma'at. Not to take somebody else's stuff.
That's exactly what they teach you. They teach you to break you down first when you train martial arts. They teach you to break you down first.
Abomination because of the pornographic things that people say this is from Egypt, but it was not from the indigenous Mayatean point of view. It was from just what was said, the pornographic intent of the Greeks and the Romans that had come in to mess up things. And so too, what they would do is they would go and take the pure, black, beautiful woman and put her into the temple and make her a temple prostitute. So that black women eventually, because they were so luscious and attractive when they were in the pure of Mayat, then they would want it. But later on, in a place called Corinth, Corinthians in the Bible. Corinth was the cesspool of the planet. And what was happening there, they were taking the priestess woman, Aphrodite, Afro meaning African, pollute her and offer her up in the same way that they would take the men and commit sodomy on the men. So that you need to know when you see people walking around these inner cities, women that are so degraded, realize that that tradition was not our tradition, and they need to be taught how foreigners come in to use them, misuse them, and in the process destroy the family.
Say hello to this family here, y'all. How you doing? Good to see you.
How are you? Hello. Hello.
My brother. How you doing?
How are you?
This the Holy of Holies?
The king told the leaders, get me parts of the enemies who were the Libyans and the sea people. So they started cutting the right hand. This is not enough. They start cutting the left hand. We cannot differentiate between the hands. What is differentiate is the genital organ. Kemetic people circumcise. For the fencing and the laws of the fencing. Come this way.
Before they leave, just right here. This is the Nasut Biki, right? Third. Look at his crown. That's the war crown, which was also, they called the Kapresh or the blue crown, also imitating the hairstyle of the Kushites who helped defeat the Hyksos. They honored these Africans by creating a crown. Now, a lot of times you'll see little circles in it. That's not a design. That was symbolic of hair, neck. Okay, this one is just looks smooth, but that was the Kapresh, the war crown. In front of Amun, showing that he has defeated his enemies, and Amun is satisfied. Yeah, you should see there's on my website starts with that bird. So yeah, symptomatic thinking, not just symbolic. Everything has a particular word. And look at constantly what they're saying here above this ma'at. It's saying was dominion and power for your life. Dominion and power for life. But you got to take charge of your life. Dominion and power only comes through ma'at and studying. And so that's why you have Shushat and Jhutyms. And here this says master of appearances. So it's also, this is to appear to adornment. So he's the master of appearances, Mesura, and he's telling you here, Heka Iwent, ruler of the city of Iwent. Whenever you see this, these cities are so old, they belong to the ancient Twa people. Okay, the Anu, the ancient Twa people. Okay, so we haven't talked much about that, but no court was complete without a Twa from the central of Africa. And the first Haru is best Haru from the Twa.
What are the Twa people known as today?
Huh?
What are the Twa people called today?
They have some derogatory names, but they are the Sankoi, the San people. Mama Jeffries will even tell you the Wagdu,
They're also called, the Europeans called them pygmies, but that's a derogatory, that's like calling us the N-word. Okay. But they're the Sand people, the Chwa, the Anu, and they are the people who populated the planet, who left African continent and went and populated every place else. About 150 to 200,000 years ago.
So is the Chika people part of that? Chika?
I'm not sure. I don't know who Chika is. I don't know. Like if you're in the Filipinos, those people called the Nigeritas, those are the Chwa people, those are Sand people. And in Japan, they have the Anu, who are the original inhabitants of the 7 islands of Japan. That's the same Chwa people.
Dr. Ronoku Rashidi did a nice little piece of it. Yeah.
Sweet.
Can you give them some more names of the Chwa people? I gave them the Sand Koi, the Mbuti. That's the name I was trying to think. That's another name of the tribe.
Another one is Kum, Batswa, and Botswana. All those are different names, and there are even more.
Right, and those are the Anu people, all those different names. And they're the ones that left the African continent first, maybe 150 to 200,000 years ago, and populated all across southern Asia and then moved up north.
Thank you.
Oh, the number of cobras at the top. I think 6 here. I think that's it. Other area at the top. I want to show. Is it, I know it is.
There's just these cobras just surrounded by the name. That's why they have room to put colors.
Oh, okay.
Because the cobras are protecting the name of the king. Right. The cobras are in a striking position.
Happy family, we're gonna move out. Next stop is Big Khufu. We gotta get moving on the road, so we gotta go straight ahead, straight to the bus. Khufu tomorrow, straight to the bus.
What are we looking at?
The Egyptian.
Not just about beauty.
Asar, pay for me, come here, huh? For Kemet. Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah. What's up?
We're in the tomb of Harkhuf.
We have a whole bunch of people.
What we gonna do though? You know, we can yeah, we can rotate. You know what I mean? When we finish.
But they want to get in off the phone. Come on, Miss Brenda. There's space over here where I am.
There's some room back here
There's
too.
one back here.
A lot of room.
I was on a slave ship.
All right, so the minute we finish, we can let them in.
Okay.
All right? So, I got everyone's attention?
Yes.
We're at the tomb of Harkhuf, all right? For all those who've seen the film, Harkhuf was one of the major cast members in the film. He was the governor of Elephantine, or the Aswan region, during the 6th dynasty. In fact, he served under the rule of Hapi II. When we were in Dahshur at the Red Brick Pyramid, for those who went up and went inside the pyramid, all those who just went on the outside, they looked to the north. The first pyramid you see is Hapi II. So you had an opportunity to see it, the person who he served under. This man is famous for his expeditions to a land they call Yam, which is in the Sudan. Most scholars believe it's in the Sudan today. It talks about his countless trade expeditions to Yam and him carving out or mapping out certain trade routes. And what's interesting about his trade routes, he speaks about fearing for his life as he would go through the Middle Nile region. Going down, he would take the river, but coming up, he would have to try to come through the desert. So the king of Yam, because he feared that with the goods that he would get from Yam, he would either be robbed or killed. So the king of Yam gave him an escort back to Kemet. And one of the things he brought back, which Hapi II loved so much, was one of the things. So we speak about these trade expeditions, and we talk also about the economics, politics, and culture, that which Dr. Jeffries talks about is the pyramid analysis. Here we have an individual who was an economist because he was dealing heavily in trade. He was also a politician because he was the governor of his region. And the culture of the Nile Valley culture of cooperative economics is what kept them thriving. So Harkhuf is a huge part of the history, and he also speaks to the history of what happened. So one of the narratives, and you'll see this when I will send tomorrow for those who are going, it's kind of confusing sometimes because they make it seem like there was constant wars and struggle between Kemet and Nubia. But with this Harkhuf story and others, we understand that it wasn't the entire region. It was some people. If you look here and look at these kind of as borders, this middle area here is an area which he was trying to avoid. So up here, we Kemet, this area here is where this is a hostile group here. This area here is friendly. And over time, this is the region that was constant conflict with not only the people of the south, but the peoples of the north. So, I'm sorry, so we kind of brought it out in the film is that the people in this area here were constant migrants from the west that were coming in from the interior of the continent that didn't understand the establishment of these two kingdoms. And as they would come here, they would try to set up their own situation, which caused the constant back and forth wars between the two of them. So, what the Europeans are not going to say that, what they're going to tell you is that this beige group, if they don't ever want to define it, is beige and black, constantly fighting. But as you can see, Harkhuf was certainly, he's clearly brother. Clearly. So we can kind of shift now. All right.
Is there another tomb up here or
This is the only way we can visit this several.
No, if it's not on your map we're talking about? No. Thank you.
together of over 20 countries. The United States donated almost half of the money to move this. They had the greatest scientists in the world. They had bulldozers, map cranes, everything. They could not duplicate exactly what our ancestors did 4,000 years ago. Now it hits one on the kneecap, hits another one, and then I heard one guy say, well, this one is the lecture of the moon. That's why the sun don't hit it. No, that's miscalculations. Okay. So again, I want y'all to, the enormity of the techno, brother want to know about science, the technology and science that it went to line that up with the stars at a particular time of the year, going through 3 chambers to hit the Holy of Holies. So the high dam, this high dam was built by the Russians. They were the main people who built this high dam. And so they had to move this up and over because they had to say, they were making a whole lot of money off of this, let me just say, as a tourist attraction. So this couldn't, almost 80% of the Nubian temples and monuments and homelands and artifacts are under Lake Nasser. And some that were left in Sudan, now Sudan has built a dam and Ethiopia is building a dam. So all the Nubian stuff will be almost underwater. So unless we get a scuba diving team together, that stuff is lost forever. Okay, but you just get an idea of what's happening. So this was actually the border. This was actually an ancient Kush. And so Egypt now owns this territory. Okay, but this used to be part of ancient Kush. So this is Ursa Ma'at also letting the ancient Kushites know just how bad he is. Okay, when you travel this way and you pass my monuments, you know you're in trouble. Okay, if you're not coming as a friend. So, and look how enormous this is. So you know whoever's responsible for building this ain't no joke. You know, so you get an idea. This was a tremendous, and this is done in his lifetime.
Wow.
So I believe it's like 60 feet high. You know, so I'm just trying to give you just an enormity of what happened there. Hor-em-akhet is 60 feet high and 240 feet wide. So this is rivaling statues like that.
Man.
This is also a political statement as well, because as Mfundishi said, we are in Nubia, and it's firmly believed that Nefertari was from this area. Ramesses II was borrowing an idea that had pre-existed him in terms of building a monument for someone from this land who was married to. Imhotep III, who was married to Queen T, built a similar dual temple, but further up south in Sudan, in a place called Solak. And he has a temple dedicated to himself and to also his wife. So there seems to be some type of a continuation of this political alliances that the ancient Kemet had with the Kushites, and particularly when it came to marriages and also honoring their people in their land as well. So that's a big part of it. Also, with this temple here, speaks about the first peace treaty known to Earth, or known on Earth, in terms of Ramesses having a great battle against the Hittites. It ended in a stalemate, and that stalemate resulted in the first peace treaty known to man. And you can actually see remnants of it inside the United Nations, because that's where the actual records were kept in terms of where they were, where it's stored today. Another part of this is, as well, is he is more commonly, I guess you could say, known as the Pharaoh of the Exodus. At this point, ancient Kemet is fighting battles as far north as Syria in terms of trying to have strongholds on land. I mean, everything in between, which the land of Canaan and Israel would be a part of, is already a part of the empire. Kadesh, as we said earlier, is a part of that trade route. The Hittites grew stronger towards the end of the 18th dynasty. They grabbed control of it, and Kemet was trying to regain that area again so that they could use it for vital trade. So right here, on the side of the wall, you can see a lot of that. Also, when we go inside, we can't do any explanations, but there's a lot of information in regards to how they saw their neighbors, who was hostile and who was friendly. And there's some interesting images here that some interpret incorrectly, but we will, make that claim.
And I just need you to know, people try to make believe that ancient Kemet was always at war with ancient Nubia. European countries are at war with other European countries. I mean, sometimes you have conflict with neighbors. So there are certain times when there was conflict between ancient Kemet and ancient Kush. But the majority of the time, they were allies. The majority.
It is
Okay.
one particular group, and that's the thing. It's so many. We understand Africa as very like single groups of people. Some people call them tribes, and that's the same thing they saw themselves as, because these different tribes that kind of moved into the Nile Valley. They just happened to formulate a nation here, but there were always groups of people coming in and out. And there was one particular group that it seems like they constantly had some issues with. But as Mfundishi said, it wasn't everyone. It was one particular group.
In my book, Spiritual Warriors Are Healers, in the first book, you'll get a chance to read some of that, who the particular group of Nubians or ancient Kushites that they did have conflict with. But then at another time, that same group that they had conflict with became an ally. So I want to show you, it wasn't, you know, just always, like you'll see Nubians in chains, and the European Egyptologists like to say that the Nubians were the slaves of the ancient Kemet.
Goodness. Wow. This is, oh, hey.
He's a captive from the east. Captive, one of the best captains from the south. Orders of different forms in Africa.
All of them Catholics.
So he's showing you he's the ruler of all of us.
Now we're going into the inner court. It's the inner court right here, right?